identical in terms of how you deal
No,
with
they're not. On the earlier model Dash 8s, the speed bias is activated through turning the propeller de-ice on, and in the later model Dash 8s, the speed bias is activated through a switch called the increased reference speed switch.
So when you're converting from one plane to the other in training, that you're satisfied there's ample instruction to pilots making the conversion?
In response to these events, we've obviously we've investigated, and we've investigated those events to understand the causation of the events, and we've implemented and are implementing crew coordination procedures, hard checklist items to ensure that the pilots turn the increased ref switch off when it needs to be off, and they don't inadvertently leave it on after exiting icing conditions.
And going to the training, I mean, the pilots who are operating the Q400 all given their training in the Q400, or are people learning in the Dash 300s and then applying it to?
The training path is usually via the Dash 8 300, then on to the 400.
Okay. I think if we go to the low energy events as well, which were with the safety events, they were all on the Q300s, not on the Q400s as well.
Right.
So it was on that aircraft, so that's been the longest in the fleet.
But Mr. Joyce, I think you've said earlier that you've confirmed that it's not a design fault.
It's not a design fault. I mean, the Q300s issue that we've had. I mean, there is on the as Mark said, on the VREF switch, there is a procedure. It's designed for that. There is a procedure that we are reinforcing for the pilots to actually switch that switch off at the appropriate times. And that's given us a number of the stick shaker issues that have occurred in the 15 that I think have been quoted previously. We really focus again on the 4 safety issues, which are the low speed ones. And there's a whole series of different reasons, not related, I think it's fair to say, Mark, to any design issues on the aircraft. And we've had a number of different audits that have taken place on this. Mark, it's worthwhile talking about them.
In relation to the 4 low-speed events, 3 in 2008 and 1 in mid-2010, in relation to those events, we've conducted, obviously we've investigated those events, we've conducted end-to-end reviews of our recruitment, training programs and our flight and our operating procedures. And we've had external subject matter experts involved in those reviews, and we're at the back end of implementing the procedural changes associated with those reviews. In addition to that, though, as part of that process, last year we invited Bombardier, the aircraft manufacturer, to come in and conduct an audit of our crew operating procedures and of our training programs, and that audit involved Bombardier reviewing all of our manual suite that details our crew operating procedures, of observing pilots flying the aircraft out on line operational flights, and they also observed training session, recurrent training and initial training sessions in the simulator.
That sort of begs the question,
Sure.
Is there anything peculiar about the regular pattern of these things as opposed to elsewhere around the world where the same aircraft are flown? Is this happening all around the world?
Yeah. It has happened, yes, it is. It is. It has happened.
That would almost lead you to believe that it's something to do with the aeroplane.
Because I think why I had this reporting, I think there's a few things. I mean, we see some of the stick shaker events, if you want to call them that, the environmental ones, as an example, and they occur on the Boeing fleet today. So we get them on our jet aircraft, Peter. It's worthwhile talking about that.
This is the environmental ones that Mark mentioned earlier, generally as a result of turbulence, wind shear, and you get a momentary blurp on the stick shaker. It's not an uncommon occurrence. I think on the 400 fleet over the past 12 months, we incurred, I think it was...
The 747-400.
Yeah, the 747-400 fleet. Sorry, it was, I think it was about 40 or something. Anyway, well, I'm not sure of the number, but the point is it is not an uncommon occurrence as a result of these things. And as Mark also indicated, the aircraft is not near stalling. It's the pilot. It's a momentary thing that the pilot has no time to react to whatsoever.
So our belief is that on the force safety issues, I'll come back to another one which could be getting into the mix, Senator, but on the force safety issues, there are procedural issues and attention issues, and as Mark has been going through, we have changed them. We've done a whole series of different activities, starting when the first three occurred, and there was a marked difference. After those first three occurred in a badge, we had a long period with big improvement in the flight data information, big improvement in that these techniques were working, and then we had this one issue occurring then later. Then we've since gone back in and done a whole series of more comprehensive reviews on it to try and figure out, had we missed something, is there something else we needed to do? And there may have been special events around that one issue, but there are various things that we then took into place to try and make sure that we eliminate it going forward. And those procedure changes, as Mark says, are going through the system as we speak.
And do you think that's going to alter the pattern of the regularity of the event?
I think so. I mean, it's already reduced. After those batch of three, then we had a year later, we only had one. So we want to eliminate them completely. But we believe that the process we're putting in place is that process designed to do that. Now, there is another set of stick shaker issues, Senator, which people could be referring to, which is called, I think Bombardier called them erroneous? Nuisance. Bombardier called them nuisance events that are on the Q300 issues, and I might get Mark to explain them and how they work. But these again are not safety issues. These are just activity that's occurring on the Q300 aircraft.
All around the world.
All around the world, on all operators. Mark?
Yeah, on the 300 aircraft only, we've had a number of what Bombardier technically refer to as nuisance events. These events usually occur during cruise or descent. In other words, when the aircraft is at high speed and nowhere near the stalling speed. The events usually last less than 1 second, and only one control column momentarily shakes. We've been working with Bombardier now to identify, and by the way, as Alan has said, that all operators around the world are experiencing these. Transport Canada is aware of the events, and they're also working with Bombardier to identify a fix. Bombardier has provided us a letter which tells us that these events are not safety of flight related, and in fact Bombardier recently conducted a risk assessment, and the representatives in that risk assessment were Transport Canada designated airworthiness delegates, and that the risk associated with these events was rated as low.
Who paid for that assessment?
It was convened by Bombardier.
I have to say, one of the things that QantasLink...
independent as the person who pays.
But I think it's important to understand that, as I said, at that risk assessment, there were Transport Canada designated airworthiness delegates. They are delegates of Transport Canada.
Can I say again what Mark said, that we don't see these as safety issues because they're occurring typically in cruise. They're occurring for brief seconds, and they're not indicating any stall issue that's going to occur on the aircraft. And we haven't rested there, because we've been leading the way with Bombardier for now some time, for them to remove these erroneous or spurious or whatever they want to call them issues that are occurring.
But the low speed events, which are a safety issue, are they pilot error?
Yes, they are. And I think the important thing to understand there is that we've put a huge amount of effort into analysing why these events have occurred, into understanding the causation of the events, and we're addressing that causation with training, recruitment, and pilot standard operating procedures.
So, pardon my ignorance, but do you simulate these in a simulator?
Yes, we do. We do. We actually, as a result of these events, we've increased our frequency of stick shaker recovery training, but we've also, in the simulator events, included what we call threats. That is, we create events where pilots may become distracted and lose situational awareness around their speed. And what that's designed to do is allow us to give training to pilots to give them better situational awareness, better monitoring skills, and better speed awareness.
I have to say, Senator, again, just recapping that again, not being complacent, they're calling in Bombardier, and we had a recent big audit taking place with Deloitte, where a whole series of safety experts from around the world both found that the actions that we have in place subsequent to these, they believed were good, were sufficient, and are addressing the problem. So the way Qantas has gone about identifying the problem, finding the root cause of it, and then putting actions into place to address it, from all the experts that we've called upon, they believe that that is correct. The other thing, as Mark pointed out, there's still a whole series of protections before this comes a stall event. We had more, still protections within it, and in all of these cases, the pilots did a recovery, the appropriate stall recovery before it got there.
Fair to say, and I'd be interested to know if you simulate the distraction of the pilot so you can enable the stick shake to event to surprise him. Is it due to simply distraction?
Mr. Chairman, we don't actually distract the pilots to lead them into a stick shaker event. We provide distractions which I guess allows us to have confidence that the pilots, because one of the things we identified, one of the contributing factors to these events was the pilots were distracted by something. So as a result of that, we put distractions in the simulator events to give us confidence that the pilot group is managing and appropriately prioritising their tasks in the cockpit, so they don't get distracted and so they don't lose awareness of the aircraft speed.
Chair, can I raise three issues very quickly? Did you finish, Mr. Shane? Just so for the sake of completeness, and I do appreciate, I think, as to the whole committee, that you've been back. You've been. This is the second time you're back to give some very comprehensive evidence. With the 4 cadets, and you may want to take some of these on notice because of time constraints, are they being employed on a part-time basis, and if so, why is that? And can you reassure the committee that the 4 cadets will not have their future employment prospects harmed in any way as a result of the fact that this is something that's come to the attention and scrutiny of the committee?
Let me start with the second point, which I can absolutely guarantee that anyone that wants to talk about safety in any forum won't be, or in any of these sorts of formats, whether it be the ATSB, CASET or a Senate hearing, would never be in any way jeopardised or their career in any way harmed.
Although these cadets haven't come to it, it was via the union that these things were brought. Let's make that clear.
No concern. We have no issue with that whatsoever. And the pilots are all employed on a similar contract that we employ our pilots around the region, which is they're all paid hourly. So the New Zealand pilots, when we got into cadet discussion around salaries, remember, they're paid $70 an hour. And then what we do is we have a minimum guaranteed floor of hours that they get. And the Australian pilots are the same. The cadets are paid $96 an hour.
Sure. Secondly, that go-around incident in Singapore where the allegation was that the captain was